Velther stood before the full council assembly. The data files Sarah had given him. Loaded into the central display system, his hands trembled slightly as he prepared to detonate a bomb that would shatter millennia of carefully maintained order. Distinguished members, he began, his voice steady despite his anxiety. I have evidence of systematic corruption at the highest levels of this council, evidence of deliberate suppression of younger species, economic manipulation, and covert operations to maintain elder species dominance. The chamber erupted immediately. Chancellor Duvin called for order. But Velther activated the display. The documents appeared for all to see, holographic and undeniable. The debate that followed lasted for 3 days. The elder species denied, deflected, accused Velther of being manipulated by human propaganda, but the evidence was too solid, too detailed. Other species began sharing their own experiences, their own grievances. The dam broke. A faction emerged supporting Velther's call for reform. Led by the Kresh and joined by moderate elements from across the council, they demanded accountability, transparency, fundamental restructuring. But the hardliners refused. They saw reform as surrender, as the end of everything they had built. The crisis came to a head when the hardliner faction, led by the Molanthi and supported by the oldest species, attempted to resolve matters through force. They assembled a military fleet and announced their intention to bring humanity back into compliance. This cannot be permitted to continue, declared the Molanthi commander. Humanity has violated every principle of galactic order. They share restricted technology, undermine council authority, and encourage rebellion. We will demonstrate that there are consequences. Velther tried desperately to stop it. He pleaded, argued, showed them the military assessments Sarah had shared, but the hardliners were beyond reason. They believed in their superiority, their right to rule, their inevitable victory. The fleet entered human space. 300 warships, the largest military force assembled in centuries. They expected humanity to back down, to negotiate, to recognize the futility of resistance. They were catastrophically wrong. The battle lasted 73 hours. It was a slaughter. Human ships appeared from seemingly nowhere, using FTL systems that didn't require jump points. Their weapons cut through council shields like they didn't exist. Their tactics were aggressive, innovative, ruthless. The council fleet broke and ran after losing 2/3 of its ships. The survivors limped back to council space, carrying tales of technological superiority they couldn't comprehend. And then, in the aftermath, a human fleet appeared in orbit around the council's capital world. 50 ships. More than enough to reduce the planet to ash. They didn't fire. They didn't threaten. They just waited. The message was clear. Humanity could destroy the council whenever they chose. They were choosing not to. For now, the hardliners' support collapsed overnight. How could they claim superiority when they had been so thoroughly defeated? How could they justify their rule when they had led the galaxy into disaster? Velther seized the moment. He called for emergency reform votes, backed by the evidence of corruption and the reality of humanity's power. The old guard fought back, but they were finished. Nobody trusted them anymore. Nobody believed in their wisdom. Galactic Council officially dissolved 4 months after the battle. It was replaced by the Galactic Assembly, a new framework based on principles humanity and the Sovereign Alliance had been advocating. Equal representation regardless of species, age, or history. Transparent governance with no privileged positions. Technology sharing in all directions. Autonomous internal affairs with cooperation on external matters. Not every species joined immediately. Some elder species withdrew to their own space, unable to accept the new order. Some younger species chose independence, pursuing their own paths. The most recognized that cooperation was still valuable if it could be done fairly. Sarah Chun attended the inaugural session of the Galactic Assembly as humanity's representative. She sat beside Velther, who now represented a reformed Kresh government that had purged its old leadership. "You did it," she said quietly. "You actually convinced them to change." "You gave me the tools," Velther replied, "and the courage. I spent decades serving a system I knew was unjust. Telling myself it was necessary for stability. You forced me to confront that lie. How does it feel?" Velther's gill slits fluttered in what might have been a sigh. Terrifying, liberating, uncertain. The old order was stable. Predictable, this? He gestured at the assembly chamber. Filled with species that had never had real power before. This is chaos. It's democracy. Sarah corrected. It's messy and loud and sometimes frustrating. But it's honest. At least now when things go wrong. We're all responsible. We can't blame it on elders who know better. The Assembly's first major crisis came quickly. Border disputes between newly autonomous regions, trade disagreements without the Council's iron-fisted regulation conflicts that would have been suppressed under the old system now erupted into the open, but they were resolved through negotiation, compromise, and mutual respect. Species that had barely spoken to each other, under council hierarchy, now worked together. As peers, it wasn't smooth. It wasn't always pretty, but it was working well. Tar found himself constantly busy. The assembly required more active participation than the council ever had. More relying on elder species to make decisions. Now every issue required building consensus across dozens of sovereign powers. He worked longer hours than ever before. "Is it worth it?" he asked Sarah during a rare break. "All this chaos, this uncertainty, we traded stability for freedom. Was it the right choice?" Sarah considered the question. "Look at what's happening. A joint Kresh human medical research station developing treatments that help both species, a Thornback trade cooperative that's bringing prosperity to regions. The council neglected 3 new civilizations joining Galactic society as full partners instead of subordinate clients. Is that worth some chaos and uncertainty?" "When you put it that way, the old stability was built on keeping people down," Sarah said. "It was peace through suppression. This is different. We're building something genuine. It'll take time. And yes, it's harder, but it's real." 5 years after humanity's initial withdrawal, Velther stood with Sarah at the dedication of a new facility, the Joint Human Kresh Research Station, built in the system that had once been the border between their territories. Now it was just space. Shared space where their people worked together freely. Young scientists from both species collaborated on projects that would have required years of council approval before. Now they just did the work, sharing ideas across species lines with an ease that would have been impossible under the old system. "My people have a saying," Velther said. "The deepest rivers flow slowly. We thought that meant wisdom required patience. But maybe it just meant we were stuck in old patterns, unwilling to change." "We have a saying too," Sarah replied. "Adapt or die." The galaxy was dying under the council's rule. It just didn't realize it yet. You helped save it, even if the process was painful. A young Kresh scientist approached, speaking excitedly with a human colleague about some breakthrough they had achieved together. They barely noticed the 2 dignitaries watching them. They were too focused on their work, their shared excitement transcending the barriers of species and history. "That's the future," Sarah said softly. "Not us. Not our conflicts and old wounds, but them, working together because it never occurred to them not to." Velther's gill slits fluttered in agreement. "I still wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, terrified that we made a terrible mistake, that we destroyed something precious that can never be rebuilt." "The council wasn't precious," Sarah said. "It was just old. Old isn't the same as good. Sometimes old things need to die so new things can grow. And if this new system fails, If the chaos becomes too much? Sarah smiled. Then we'll figure something else out. That's what sentient beings do. We adapt, we learn, we try again. That's better than clinging to a broken system because we're afraid of change. They watched the young scientists work for a while longer, then returned to their duties. The assembly had another crisis to manage, another dispute to resolve, another challenge to the fragile new order, but they faced it together, not as elder and junior, not as superior and subordinate, but as equals partners in building a galaxy that worked for everyone. Not just those who had always held power. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't stable. In the old sense, it was messy and complicated and required constant effort. But it was honest. And in that honesty was the seed of something better than what had come before. Sarah returned to her quarters that night and composed a message to Captain Rodriguez, still serving on patrol duty, defending human space. The captain had asked what their withdrawal had ultimately achieved, whether the chaos they had caused was worth it. Sarah wrote simply, "We proved that the impossible was possible. We showed that younger species could stand as equals. We forced a galaxy to confront its own injustice." Was it worth it? Ask the species who now have voices they never had before. Ask the civilizations we met who were brought into galactic society as partners instead of subjects. Ask yourself if you would go back to serving under council restrictions. The answer, Sarah knew, was obvious. They had gambled everything. The neutral station orbited a red dwarf in unclaimed space, equidistant from council territory, human space, and the Sovereign Alliance zones. It was a bare-bones facility, hastily constructed for this single meeting. No decorations, no comfort. Just a conference room and basic life support. Volther arrived first, his security team sweeping the station before allowing him to enter. He waited in the conference room, reviewing his notes one final time. 2 years had passed since humanity's withdrawal. 2 years of galactic upheaval, economic chaos, and the slow unraveling of the old order. The door opened. Sarah Chen walked in, and Velther barely recognized her. She had always dressed formally for their meetings, maintaining diplomatic propriety. Now she wore a simple black uniform with minimal insignia. Her hair was shorter, her expression harder. She looked like someone who had shed a burden and gained a purpose. "Ambassador Velther," she said, her tone neutral. "Special Envoy Chun," he replied. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Let's not waste time on pleasantries," she said, sitting across from him. "You wanted to talk, I'm here talk." Her directness stung, but Velther pressed forward. "The galaxy is fragmenting. The council is in crisis. The younger species are in revolt. We need to find a path forward." "We?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "There is no we. Ambassador, humanity is no longer part of your council. We have no stake in its survival or collapse, but you have a stake in galactic stability," Velther argued. "Chaos serves no one. What happens in council space affects human space eventually. We're all connected." Sarah leaned back in her chair. "You're right. We are connected. That's why I'm here. But let me be absolutely clear about something. Humanity is not coming back to the council. Not under any terms you're currently imagining, not as junior partners, not as equals within the existing framework. We're done with that entire system." "Then what do you want?" Velther asked. "That's the wrong question," Sarah said. "The question is, what are you willing to accept? Because the galaxy is changing whether the council likes it or not. The only choice is whether that change is managed or chaotic." She activated a holographic display between them. It showed star charts, economic data, technological assessments. Velther's eyes widened as he absorbed the information. "This is what humanity has accomplished in 2 years," Sarah explained. "Our new FTL system is operational. We've established 73 new colonies. We've made first contact with 5 previously unknown civilizations and brought them into our sphere of influence as true partners. The display shifted to show technological readouts. We've advanced our AI research to create genuine synthetic consciousness, fully integrated into our society. We've extended average human lifespan by 40% through genetic treatments. We've developed energy systems that make your fusion plants look primitive. Velther felt his gill slits flutter with anxiety. This level of advancement in such a short time. It's unprecedented. It's what happens when you stop holding yourself back, Sarah said. For 2 centuries, we limited our research to stay within council regulations. We handicapped ourselves trying to be good galactic citizens. And what did it get us? Dismissed. Patronized, blamed when we tried to help. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. Viridian Prime still haunts us. 3 billion dead because the council wouldn't listen to our warnings. We could have saved them, but your science directorate was too proud to take humans seriously. That was a failure. Velther admitted, a terrible one, I've said so repeatedly in council sessions. Words, Sarah said dismissively. Words don't bring back the dead. They don't change the fundamental problem. The council was never designed to treat younger species as equals. It was designed to maintain elder species dominance. Everything else was window dressing. She brought up new data, and Velther's breath caught. Where did you get this? We've had sympathizers in the council for decades, Sarah said. People like you. Actually, species who saw the injustice but felt powerless to change it. They've been feeding us information. This is proof of what we always suspected. The document showed deliberate technology suppression, economic manipulation to keep younger species-dependent covert operations to sabotage rising civilizations, intelligence-sharing agreements that excluded most council members' votes rigged through backroom deals, everything humanity had accused the council of, laid out in damning detail. The elder species built a system to preserve their power, Sarah said. They dress it up in language about stability and wisdom and the proper order of things. But it's just control, the same control every empire in history has exercised over its subjects. Velther stared at the evidence. He had suspected some of this, but seeing it documented was different. If this becomes public, the council will collapse immediately. I know, Sarah said. That's why I'm showing it to you. We don't actually want complete chaos. We want reform, real reform, not the cosmetic changes the council keeps offering. She outlined humanity's position. It was radical and uncompromising, a new galactic framework to replace the council. True representative democracy with no privileged positions for elder species. Technology sharing in all directions, not just from old to young. Transparent governance with no backroom deals, recognition of the Sovereign Alliance as an equal power bloc. The council will never accept this, Velther said. Then the council will become irrelevant, Sarah replied. The Sovereign Alliance is already implementing these principles in their territories. They're growing stronger every day. More species are joining them. Meanwhile, council space is stagnant, fragmented, declining. She brought up economic projections. Within 5 years, the Sovereign Alliance's combined economy will exceed the Council's within 10. They'll be the dominant force in the galaxy, and humanity? She smiled slightly. We're playing a different game entirely. We're expanding into unexplored space. We're building something new. We don't need the Council or the Alliance. We're doing this to help the galaxy avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Summon the Council advocate military intervention. Velther said quietly, I know that's the other reason I'm here. Sarah's expression hardened. Tell your hawks that would be a catastrophic mistake. She brought up military assessments. Velther's eyes widened in shock. The ships he had seen on long range scans were just the beginning. Humanity had built a military force that rivaled the entire Council fleet, and their technology was decades ahead. We don't want war, Sarah said. but we're prepared for it. We've spent 2 years developing weapon systems without council restrictions if forced to fight. We'll win, and it won't be close. You're bluffing. You know me better than that, Sarah said. I don't bluff. We're offering you a choice: help reform the council from within. Convince them to accept fundamental change, or step aside and let the old system collapse. We'll build something better from the ruins. Valther felt the weight of history pressing down on him, millennia of galactic civilization potentially ending. Because the elder species couldn't accept change. Yet he also felt a strange sense of liberation. Sarah was right. The system was broken. It had always been broken. They had just pretended otherwise. What do you need from me? He asked. Be the voice of reason in the council. Sarah said. Use this evidence to force accountability. Push for genuine reform. You have allies there. Species who see what we see. Give them cover to act. She stood, preparing to leave. This is bigger than our personal relationship. Valther, but I remember the work we did together. I remember that you tried to listen when others wouldn't. That matters. That's why I'm giving you this chance. Valther stood as well. And if the council refuses? If they double down? Sarah met his eyes. Then, in 5 years, when we return to the galactic stage, it will be to accept the surrender of a dying order, save them from themselves, or don't. The choice is theirs. But the old galaxy is over. The question is whether the new one is born through reform or revolution. She walked to the door. Paused. One more thing, we've already started working with some council species directly, trade agreements, technology exchanges, cultural programs. They're building relationships with us outside council framework. If the council falls, we want to make sure there's something to catch people. Then she was gone, leaving Valther alone with the weight of the evidence she had shared and the terrible choice she had presented. He looked at the data again. Everything documented, verified, undeniable. The council's crimes lay bare. He could bury this, protect the system he had served for decades, or he could use it as a weapon to force change and risk destroying everything. But really, was there a choice? The system was already dying. Sarah was right about that. The only question was whether it would die slowly, dragging the galaxy into chaos, or quickly, making room for something better. Valther gathered the data files and prepared to return to council space. He knew what he had to do. He just hoped he had the courage to do it. The cracks appeared slowly at first. Then all at once von Travai sat in his office reviewing intelligence reports that grew more alarming by the day. 6 months had passed since humanity's withdrawal, and the galaxy was discovering just how much it had depended on human participation. The economic disruptions were bad enough. But something worse was emerging. The younger species were restless. Cassari were the first to make a formal statement. Their ambassador stood before the council and delivered a speech that sent shockwaves through the chamber. For 8 centuries we have served on this council, the Cassari declared, their translator rendering their chittering language into standard galactic. For 8 centuries, we have followed protocols established by our elders. We have accepted their wisdom, respected their experience, but we can no longer ignore what is obvious. The Council does not serve all species equally. It serves the interests of those who control it. The chamber erupted. Chancellor Duvin called for order. But the Cassari continued. Humanity showed us what is possible. They proved that withdrawal is an option, that independence is achievable. We do not follow their path exactly, but we will no longer accept subordination as the price of participation. The Cassari demand equal voting rights, equal representation, and equal consideration, or we too shall withdraw. Within weeks, the Thornback clans issued a similar declaration, then the Silicon communes, then dozens more. The younger species were finding their voice, and that voice was. Angry Valther watched as a new coalition formed. They called it the Sovereign Alliance, 17 species. All of them relatively young in galactic terms. All of them tired of being treated as junior members. They didn't withdraw from the galaxy, like humanity had. Instead, they declared themselves outside Council jurisdiction. They would engage in galactic commerce, maintain diplomatic relations, participate in cultural exchange, but they would no longer accept Council authority over their internal affairs. This is humanity's doing. Chancellor Duvin declared at an emergency session, "They have poisoned the younger species against us. Turned them rebellious. Perhaps," Velther said carefully, "or perhaps we poisoned ourselves. The younger species have always had these grievances. We simply chose not to hear them." The economic impacts grew worse. Human merchant fleets had handled 27% of all interstellar trade. Their absence created shortages and bottlenecks. The Council attempted to fill the gap, but human logistics networks had been more efficient than anyone realized. Delivery times doubled. Costs increased. Then there was the technology gap. Human innovations had quietly become integral to galactic infrastructure. Their medical devices in hospitals, their software and communication systems, their agricultural techniques on colony worlds, all of it required human-made components, human technical support, human expertise. The Council's technology sector scrambled to replace human systems. Some succeeded, but often with inferior alternatives. Others found it impossible. The humans have been better at certain things than the elder species wanted to admit, but the real shock came when the Council's intelligence services reported that humanity was trading with the Sovereign Alliance, not just trading, but sharing technology, advanced FTL systems, energy generation, medical treatments. Everything the Council had kept restricted to maintain technological superiority. High Chancellor Duvin called an emergency security meeting. Velther attended, though he increasingly felt out of step with the hardliners who dominated these sessions. "This cannot stand," declared the Molenthi security director. "Humanity is deliberately undermining galactic stability. They are sharing dangerous technology with species that lack the wisdom to use it responsibly, or they are sharing technology that we kept restricted to maintain our own power." Velther countered, "Perhaps the real danger is that we will lose our technological advantage. That advantage maintains peace." The director shot back. Without the elder species' superior capabilities, the galaxy would descend into chaos. Velther's gill slits fluttered with suppressed anger. "We keep saying this, but is it true? Or is it simply what we tell ourselves to justify keeping others dependent on us?" The debate raged for hours. Some advocated for military intervention, force humanity to return to Council oversight, shut down their technology sharing. With the Sovereign Alliance, others warned that would be catastrophic. "We don't actually know how strong humanity has become," cautioned the Kravish military analyst. "They've been conducting research without restrictions for months. We've seen some of their new ships on long-range scans. The designs are unlike anything in our databases. They're one species." Chancellor Duvin said firmly, "We are 200, even with their innovations. They cannot stand against the combined might of the Council." But several species on the Council were wavering. The Kresh, Velther's own people, were divided. Many saw the younger species' complaints as legitimate. Others feared the loss of their privileged position. The careful balance of power that had maintained galactic stability for millennia was crumbling. Then came the economic reports. Trade volume was down 43%. Council tax revenue had dropped accordingly. Colonial development projects were stalled due to equipment shortages, and most alarming of all, several Council member species were quietly establishing trade relationships with both humanity and the Sovereign Alliance. "They're hedging their bets," Velther's assistant explained, showing him the data. "They see the direction things are moving. They don't want to be on the wrong side when the dust settles." The entertainment and cultural sectors were hit hard as well. Human music, human literature, Human games and art had dominated galactic popular culture for the past century. The other species had mocked this, called it lowbrow, unsophisticated, yet everyone consumed it. Now it was gone, and the absence was felt acutely less. Received reports of black market trading in human cultural products, bootleg copies of human films, pirated music, smuggled books. The demand was enormous and growing. He thought about Sarah Chun, wondered what she made of all this. She had worked so hard for cultural exchange between humanity and other species. She had believed in building bridges. Now those bridges were burned. Did she regret it? Or did she feel vindicated? The Council's response grew increasingly desperate. They offered concessions to the Sovereign Alliance, promised reforms, suggested new frameworks for cooperation. But the Alliance's demands were clear. They wanted the same thing humanity had wanted: true equality. Not reform of the existing system, but fundamental restructuring, and many in the Council could not accept that. To accept, it would mean admitting that the millennia of elder species dominance had been unjust. It would mean surrendering their privileged position. It would mean change. Valthor found himself in an impossible position. He saw the validity of the younger species' complaints. He understood their frustration, but he also feared what would happen if the current order collapsed too quickly. The galaxy had been stable for thousands of years. That stability had value, didn't it? Yet stability built on injustice was not peace. It was just slow-burning resentment waiting to explode. The final straw came when 3 more species withdrew from the Council, not to join the Sovereign Alliance, but to pursue complete independence. Like humanity, they didn't make dramatic declarations. They simply left, closed their embassies, recalled their ambassadors, withdrew to their own space. The galaxy was fragmenting. The careful order the elder species had maintained was falling apart. And at the center of it all, behind their closed borders, humanity continued its mysterious work. Valthor requested and received authorization for a final attempt at contact. He sent a message to Sarah Chun on every channel he could access. He explained what was happening in the galaxy. He detailed the Council's crisis. He admitted the failures that had driven humanity away, and he begged really, for dialogue. For 3 weeks. He received no response. He began to think she would ignore him forever. Then, finally, a reply, short and to the point. Ambassador Valthor, I am no longer with the diplomatic service. I now serve as Special Envoy for External Affairs, reporting directly to Earth's Planetary Council. However, in recognition of our past working relationship, I am authorized to meet with you. Once on neutral ground, I will send coordinates. Valthor stared at the message. She had agreed to meet. That was something. At least it was a start. But her tone was different, cold, formal. The warmth they had developed over decades of collaboration was gone. She wasn't coming as a colleague. She was coming as a representative of a rival power, and that, perhaps more than anything else, told Valthor just how badly the Council had miscalculated. They hadn't just lost humanity's participation. They had lost humanity's goodwill, and goodwill, once destroyed, was nearly impossible to rebuild. He began preparing for the meeting, knowing that what was said there might determine the future of galactic civilization, for better or worse. Humanity held cards, now cards the Council didn't even know existed. The question was what humanity intended to do with them. Captain Maria Rodriguez guided her patrol cruiser along the newly established border of human space. The defensive perimeter stretched across 40 star systems, a line that humanity had drawn in the cosmos and dared anyone to cross. Her sensors showed nothing but empty space and the distant flicker of stars. But she knew appearances meant little in modern warfare. Status report. She called to her tactical officer. All quiet. Captain, board drones report no incursions. Defensive platforms are at full readiness. The crash signs vessel that was shadowing us has finally moved off. Maria nodded. They had been watching human space like scavengers around a corpse, waiting to see what would emerge. Let them watch. There was nothing to see out here. The real work was happening deeper in human territory. Far from prying eyes, her communicator chimed, "Captain Rodriguez, you are cleared to leave patrol route. Proceed to Sanctuary Station for resupply and briefing." Sanctuary Station hadn't existed 4 months ago. Now, it was a massive orbital complex in the Kepler 442 system, one of dozens of installations humanity had constructed since the withdrawal. The Council would have demanded environmental impact studies, cultural assessments, diplomatic clearances. Building it would have taken years of bureaucratic navigation. Instead, it had taken 12 weeks. The station grew larger in her view screen as she approached. Dozens of ships surrounded it. Everything from military cruisers to research vessels to converted civilian transports, all bearing the blue and white insignia of independent human space. No more Council authorization codes. No more galactic registration numbers. Just human ships. Doing human work, she docked and made her way to the briefing room. Admiral Jackson was already there, along with representatives from Scientific Division and Colonial Affairs. The Admiral was old military, the kind who had chafed under Council restrictions for decades. He looked more energized than Maria had ever seen him. Good timing. "Captain, we're about to review the progress reports. I thought you'd want to see what your patrol work is protecting." The holographic display activated, filling the room with data streams and technical readouts. Dana Sarah Okonkwo from Scientific Division stepped forward. She was young, brilliant, and absolutely delighted to be working without Council oversight. "Let's start with propulsion research," she began. Council's restriction on quantum field manipulation always limited our FTL capabilities. We've been stuck using their jump gate network, paying their fees, following their routes for 2 centuries. We accepted this as the price of galactic citizenship. The display showed a new engine design, elegant and complex. Without those restrictions, we've made a breakthrough. We call it the Alcubierre Chen drive, named after the physicist who theorized it and Ambassador Chun, who fought for years to get Council approval for this research, approval that never came. Dr. Okonkwo's smile was sharp. "It doesn't require jump gates. It's faster than conventional FTL by a factor of 3, and it's entirely our own technology." Maria felt a surge of pride mixed with anger. How much had they held themselves back, trying to play by rules designed to keep them slow? "AI research?" Admiral Jackson prompted. "Even better. We've partnered with the synthetic intelligences we created. The Council classified them as dangerous technology, demanded they be limited, monitored, treated as tools rather than individuals." Dr. Okonkwo's expression hardened. "We've recognized them as full citizens. They're contributing to every field of research. The breakthroughs are exponential." The display cycled through project after project: genetic modifications that extended human lifespan and resistance to radiation, new weapon systems that made Council military technology look primitive, energy generation that was 3 times more efficient than galactic standard materials, science that enabled construction previously thought impossible. "How long until the Council notices what we're doing?" Maria asked. "They already have," said Director Chun. "No relation to the former ambassador. Their intelligence services are competent enough. They know we're developing technology beyond their regulations. They're debating what to do about it." "Let them debate," Admiral Jackson said. "By the time they decide, we'll be even further ahead." Maria had her doubts. What if they decide on military intervention? "We're strong, but we're still one species against 200. Look at this." Director Chun pulled up a different display. It showed a map of galactic civilization, color-coded by species. Red indicates species that have filed formal complaints about Council policies in the last decade. Orange indicates those who have expressed informal dissatisfaction. Yellow indicates those who are simply quiet but show signs of discontent. The map was mostly red, orange, and yellow. Only a handful of elder species showed green. We're not alone in our frustration. Chun continued. The Kasari, the Thornback clans, the Silicon Communes, dozens of others. They've been watching what we did. They're inspired. Some have already reached out through back channels. What did you tell them? Maria asked. The truth, we're done with the council. We're building our own future. If they want to trade, to share technology, to cooperate, we're willing, but only as equals, not as juniors begging for scraps. Admiral Jackson leaned back in his chair. The council maintained control by keeping everyone dependent on their infrastructure, their technology, their approval. They made it seem impossible to go it alone. We're proving them wrong. Dr. Okonkwo pulled up another display. This one showing colony worlds. We've also made first contact with 3 previously unknown civilizations, young species, just beginning to explore their local space. The council would have brought them in slowly, carefully, under council supervision and control. What did we do? Maria asked, though she suspected she knew. We offered them genuine partnership, technology sharing, information, cultural exchange. No strings attached, no demands that they join our political structure, just cooperation between equals. Dr. Okonkwo grinned. They're enthusiastic, the Zelthans especially. They have some fascinating biological technology that our best scientists are eager to learn from. Maria walked to the viewport. Looking out at the station's construction bays, new ships were being built. Designs that had never existed before. Some were exploratory vessels, meant to push further into unknown space. Some were colony ships, designed to spread humanity across more systems. And some were warships, sleek and deadly. Insurance against the possibility that the council might choose force over negotiations. Thought about her years serving in council-approved military forces. Always holding back. Always following regulations designed by species who feared human aggression. She thought about the frustration of knowing her people could do better. Be better, if only they were allowed. We tried. Didn't we? She said quietly. We really tried to make it work with them. For 200 years. Admiral Jackson confirmed. We followed their rules, respected their traditions, sought their approval, and they gave us nothing but condescension and obstruction. The Viridian crisis was the final straw. Director Chun said softly. We told them the disaster was coming. We showed them the data, begged them to act. They dismissed us as alarmist. Then 3 billion people died, and they had the audacity to blame us for warmongering when we demanded accountability. Maria turned back to face them. So what's our endgame here? We can't hide behind our borders forever. Eventually, we'll have to deal with the galaxy again. We will, Admiral Jackson agreed. But on our terms, when we're strong enough that they have to respect us, when we've built alliances with other species who are tired of council control, when we can negotiate as equals or not at all. How long? Maria asked. Best estimates? 5 years, maybe 10. The Admiral stood, walking to the viewport beside her. We're playing the long game. Captain, the Council thinks in terms of centuries, millennia. They move slowly, carefully, preserving their power through inertia. And we think different. We think in terms of progress. Adaptation, innovation will change more in 5 years than they will in 50. And when we return to the galactic stage, it won't be as supplicants. It'll be as a power they cannot ignore. Maria looked out at the ships. The station, the future humanity was building in defiant isolation. She thought about the Council. Still debating, still convinced of their superiority, still blind to how badly they had miscalculated. They had thought humanity needed them. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The emergency session chamber of the Galactic Council had never felt so tense in its 3,000 Year History Ambassador Velther of the Kresh Collective stood at his designated platform, his force scanning the data tablet in his clawed hands with growing disbelief. The message had arrived simultaneously at every council embassy, every diplomatic station, every trade hub where humanity maintained a presence. It was brief, formal, and devastating. The Terran Systems Alliance hereby withdraws from all treaties, agreements, and diplomatic relationships with the Galactic Council effective immediately. All human personnel are recalled, all embassies are closed, all trade agreements are terminated, no further communication will be entertained. That was it. No explanation, no negotiation, no warning. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives from 200 species spoke over each other in dozens of languages. The translation matrix struggled to keep pace. Accusations flew in every direction. The Molanthi delegate accused humanity of planning an invasion. The Cartheans suggested economic sabotage. The Viridians, still recovering from their recent ecological disaster, remained ominously silent. Velther had served on the council for 47 standard years. He had seen disputes, wars, first contacts gone wrong, and diplomatic incidents of every variety. But he had never seen anything like this. Humanity had been unpredictable since they joined galactic society 2 centuries ago. But this was different. This was calculated. This was final. High Chancellor Duvan called for order, her voice, amplified by the chamber's acoustic systems, finally cut through the noise. She was a Turellian, one of the eldest species in the council. Her kind had been traveling between stars when most other species were still discovering fire. "We must understand what has provoked this action," she said, her tone measured but strained. "Ambassador Velther, you have worked most closely with the human delegation. What insight can you provide?" Velther's gill slits fluttered with uncertainty. "I have none. High Chancellor, I spoke with Ambassador Chen only 3 days ago regarding the trade standardization proposal. She gave no indication of this decision. She seemed focused on her work as always." "Perhaps that was deception," suggested the Kravish representative, his crystalline body refracting the chamber's light. "Humans are known for their strategic misdirection. Or perhaps we failed to see the signs." Velther countered. He had worked with Sarah Chun for 23 years. They had negotiated treaties, resolved disputes, even shared meals in the informal way humans seem to enjoy. He respected her. She was direct, intelligent, and surprisingly patient given humanity's reputation for impulsiveness. The Chancellor assigned Velther to lead an investigation team. He was given access to all diplomatic records, all communications, all council interactions with humanity for the past decade. He retreated to his office and began the painstaking work of review. First thing he noticed was the pattern of votes over the past 10 years. Humanity had submitted 47 formal proposals to the council. 43 had been rejected. Only 4 had passed. And those were minor adjustments to existing trade regulations. The humans had proposed new safety standards for FTL travel, suggested reforms to the Council's economic policies, advocated for intervention in several developing crises. All dismissed then. There were the warnings. Velther pulled up the files on the Viridian crisis. 8 months before the disaster, human scientists had detected anomalies in Viridian Prime's atmospheric processors. They had presented their findings to the Council, warning that a cascade failure could kill billions. The Council's Science Directorate had reviewed the human data and found it insufficient for immediate action. The elder species had been insulted that these newcomers presumed to lecture them on planetary management. 3 months later, 3 billion Viridians were dead. The humans had tried to organize a relief effort. The Council had blocked it, citing proper procedures and jurisdictional protocols. By the time aid was approved, it was too late. Velther remembered the human delegation's reaction. They had been furious, but they had contained it, channeled it into formal protests. through proper diplomatic channels, and those protests had been dismissed as emotional overreaction. Velt kept digging. He found trade disputes where human innovations had been rejected as untested, only to be replicated by elder species months later without credit. He found joint research projects where human contributions had been minimized in official reports. He found countless small humiliations, casual dismissals, the thousand cuts of being treated as permanent juniors in galactic society. He tried to contact Sarah Chun directly. Using their private communication channel, the message bounced back. The channel was closed. He tried alternate methods. Reached out to other human contacts he had cultivated over the years. All silent human space had become a black box. The investigation team reconvened after 2 weeks. They had interviewed hundreds of species who dealt with humanity, reviewed thousands of hours of diplomatic footage, analyzed economic data and social trends. The conclusion was uncomfortable. They tried to work with us. Veltha reported to the Council. For 2 centuries, humanity attempted to participate in good faith. They followed our rules, respected our traditions, sought to contribute to galactic civilization, and we treated them as children playing at adult affairs. They are children. High Chancellor Duvin said sharply. 200 years in galactic society? My species has served on this council for 6,000 years. The Molanthi for 8,000. We have earned our positions through millennia of proven wisdom. And yet the humans were right about Viridian Prime. Velther said quietly. 3 billion lives might have been saved. If we had listened. The silence that followed was heavy. Several delegates shifted. Uncomfortably, the Viridian representative remained motionless. But Velther could see the grief in their posture. So what do they want? Demanded the Kravish delegate. This is clearly a negotiating tactic. What are their demands? That is what concerns me most. Velther replied. I see no indication. This is a negotiation. They have made no demands. They have not threatened. They have simply left. I believe humanity has decided we are not worth dealing with. They are done with us. Preposterous. Chancellor Duvin snapped. They are 1 species. We are 200. They need us far more than we need them. But even as she spoke, reports were coming in of disruptions. Human merchant vessels had abandoned their routes. Human technicians had left there. Posts at council facilities. Human researchers had withdrawn. From joint projects, the galaxy was discovering just how integrated humanity had become in its infrastructure and in the darkness of human space. Behind their closed borders, humanity was no longer bound by council restrictions on research, on military development, on any of the regulations designed to keep younger species in their place. Velther looked at the star charts showing human territory. A small cluster of systems. Barely 200 worlds, but humans had always been good at making the most of limited resources. They had clawed their way up from a single planet to a starfaring civilization. In mere centuries, they had thrived in the hostile environment of galactic politics. Despite constant opposition, what would they accomplish? When they stopped trying to please the council and started working only for themselves? The thought kept Velther awake through the long night cycle. He had a terrible feeling that the galaxy was about to find out